Hello. In another video, I have already discussed with you Darwin's philosophy of evolution. In that video, I gave a general overview of his evolutionary philosophy. In particular, I explained the concepts of evolution and the principle of natural selection. In this video, I am going to explain to you some of the philosophical implications of Darwin's philosophy of evolution. It is important that we need to make a distinction between Darwin and Darwinism. Many other things Darwin would not have stated himself, but taking inspiration from his philosophy, others who came after him could have developed some ideas. And that is what is known as Darwinism. So Darwinism is not to be equated with Darwin himself, because perhaps Darwin himself would not be in full agreement with some of the implications the so-called Darwinists derived from his theory. The purpose of Darwin is not to criticize religion, knowledge, or about social life. But his philosophy lends itself to some of these aspects which could be used to criticize a certain philosophy of science, philosophy of religion, philosophy of knowledge, moral, social, and political philosophy as well. It is 162 years since Darwin has published his Origin of Species. In the year 2008, to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the publication of this magnus opus, this great work, Ted Everett gave a particular speech in which he tried to spell out some of the important implications of Darwin's philosophy. Oftentimes, these implications are to be associated with Darwinism rather than Darwin himself. But because the ideas emerge from Darwin's social philosophy, we are considering that as the implications of his philosophy of evolution. In this video, I am not going to discuss in detail all the different implications. I will be rather focusing on three important aspects of the implications in philosophy. In the first place, I will be focusing on the philosophy of religion. One of the important things in philosophy of religion, or better the philosophy of God, is try and give arguments for the existence of God. One of the arguments that has been commonly given is known as the argument from design. Now we see in the world there is a certain design, there is a pattern, and there must be an intelligent designer who has made it. This particular argument is associated with William Paley, though many people have said the same thing in different ways. William Paley had given an argument from design by giving an analogy of the watch. You walk along the beach and suddenly you come across a watch, and you notice that it is intelligently designed to show us time, and then you say, if this has certain intelligence by which this particular watch is designed, then somebody who has this intelligence must have designed it. So you see, from the designed material, you can infer there must have been an intelligent person who had created this. So by this analogy of the watch, William Paley extends, we see a certain design in the whole of universe. Obviously, the universe cannot be attributed to the creation of any individual human. So there must be someone who is beyond us, above us, and therefore that is God. So creation is something that presupposes a creator. When you see a creation, you have a creator. Now, the whole of Western civilization has been influenced by this kind of thinking, partly because of the Judeo-Christian tradition, where the sacred book Bible presents God as the creator. There is the famous narrative of God creating the world in 6 days. So sometimes in the past, people have taken that literally. That idea is known as creationism. Now, with the idea of evolution, the idea of creation is challenged. It is questioned. Now, let us look at this analogy of the watch. Now, let us rephrase it. You walk along the beach and then you find a stone which is very naturally polished. You think that must be someone who must have done that, but then you realize no, because of the waves and constantly, naturally, this particular stone, which was probably shapeless and rough, now has evolved into something smooth. This also can be said not only about the inanimate objects, but also about the animate beings. So you find a crab on the beach. So it is not that somebody has created it, but through the process of natural selection, it has evolved to be what it is today. So there is no intelligent creator called God, but it is a process of natural selection by which these different species come to exist. You don't need to presuppose necessarily someone with intelligence to have made the crab or any other species for that matter. So it happens through a process of natural selection. So in the history, we find that this debate has been going on for a long time, because those who believed in creation thought this theory of evolution is a direct blow on their religion and their belief in God. Philosophy for a long time was trying to give arguments for the existence of God based on this idea of creation. Now that is challenged. But thankfully, things have emerged ever since. In the modern times, we don't oppose the idea of creation with evolution. People had come up with an idea, well, it is still possible God could have given this mechanism called the natural selection. So you don't need to necessarily oppose the theory of evolution with the idea of God. So it's no longer creationism versus evolutionism. Creation itself can be understood in the light of evolution. Thankfully, people have learned to read the Bible differently in the Western societies. It has not to be taken literally as it is narrated. You have to understand the religious meaning behind it. After all, the Bible is not meant to teach science. It is meant to teach something beyond. So you don't need to see religion as something that is opposed to science. And a biological science like that of theory of evolution by Darwin need not be seen in opposition to religious faith or religious belief. Now let us move on to the next implication. That is the implication that this theory of evolution has for knowledge, the traditional understanding of knowledge, which is called the epistemology. Now, with this theory of evolution, there is a particular moment in the epistemology, in the theory of knowledge, in philosophy, which came to be known as naturalism. So, philosophy should not be seen as an a priori discipline, something that is prior to your empirical experience. In the history of philosophy, if you are aware of this, there has been this constant battle between rationalism and empiricism in the modern times, ever since the Reformation, ever since the 16th century. We have this Descartes on the one hand saying philosophy belongs to certain a priori category. We don't necessarily rely on our external senses, our empirical senses. Science, on the other hand, goes by certain empiricism. So there has been some kind of tension that emerged. So this particular evolutionary view of science gave this new awareness, namely, if human species is also a product of evolution, then mind itself is a product of evolution. So you cannot think that mind having certain a priori knowledge independent of any sense experience. All knowledge is basically science and perhaps a continuation of science. So therefore you cannot give importance to analysis of concepts, a logical analysis. So subjects like logic perhaps would have no scope, no place from this point of view, because all that matters is everything begins from science, and perhaps you can move ahead little more from that as a point of departure. You cannot bring in something merely as analysis of linguistic concepts or analysis of logical coordination between terms. So that is not necessary. So philosophy cannot be seen as an a priori discipline. Now, but there are many problems Ted Everett brings to our attention, but one of the things that I would like to present here before you is such understanding of knowledge. The so-called naturalism is very narrowly focused. True, we cannot dispense certain influence of our external senses in gaining knowledge. But not every knowledge can only be limited to this particular positivist approach, because knowledge can always go beyond our sense experience. There are different kinds of knowledge that human beings in our experience we come to realize. There are some that we learn through our external senses. There are also some knowledge that we gain by certain intuition. There are also some knowledge that we gain by logical analysis, by deducing concepts one from another, by seeing the coordinating relationship between certain terms. The way in which certain linguistic analysis can be done gives rise also to a certain kind of knowledge. So scientific knowledge that is gained through empirical sciences, whether it is natural sciences and social sciences, is a valid knowledge, definitely yes, but it cannot be limited only to that kind of knowledge. We can think of many examples. There are knowledge that people have in certain relationship. You may not have any empirical evidence to show why we trust some people over others. But we have a certain knowledge about those people, not necessarily based on empirical evidence. We don't have a clear, measurable, quantifying data to show that, but we just trust them based on certain knowledge that is because of the relationship that we have with the people. We have no way, we cannot really quantify to say that such and such person has affection for me. But we still know that such and such person has affection for me. There is no way in which we can measure it by any empirical methods, any positive methods. So this naturalism, while limiting knowledge, the ability to gain knowledge only through these external senses, is impoverished. That is a serious problem. That could be also applied to the question of religious knowledge. So one of the problems that these naturalists, they become very hard on people who have some belief in God or religion. So they would consider this as a mere superstition. Well, I'm not saying that religious thinking, religious practices cannot be critiqued. They can be critiqued. But you cannot use one yardstick to measure another human experience, another way in which human can gain knowledge. That would be problematic. And that is the reason why some renowned scientists, including Dawkins, he calls, for example, the delusion, religion as a delusion, as a God delusion, or even Dennett. These people criticize people who follow religion as superstitious or ignorant. Now, they are very fanatical about their criticism against religion. They even call religion as a virus of the brain. Now, that I think is a rather extreme position of naturalism. That is a danger there. In as much as knowledge that we gain from natural and social sciences have validity, certain knowledge that you gain from your religious education, your education in family, the moral values that you gain have of equal importance. You cannot dismiss that. Morality, for example, cannot be shown to be empirically correct or verifiable. Moral norms, they are norms, they are not facts. Facts can be verified empirically, norms cannot be. Yet these norms are valid. They form part of our knowledge, so we cannot dismiss them. So also certain religious teachings, they can be very valid even if they don't fulfill the criteria of naturalism. That is another major setback with this naturalism. But note, I am not saying these are the words of Darwin himself. I am saying this is how Darwinism has evolved, and there are some implications that are far-fetched, and some of them are even very critical. So we need to look them up very critically. The third important philosophical implication which concerns me most is the social, moral and political dimension of this theory of evolution. Now, this came to be known as social Darwinism. One of the important aspects is the survival of the fittest. The species that can adapt better to the environment survives. And then not everybody could survive. So only those who can compete this survival. And the social Darwinism would imply, this would imply that there are certain human beings who are superior to others because of the intelligence, because that make them capable of better possibility for better survival. Now, you can also say about the physical fitness and many other things, but of late this question of intelligence, because in the modern society, intelligence becomes important for survival. It's no longer, we are no longer in the Homeric society where your physical strength was important. So your strength is now measured in terms of your intelligence. So this leads to sometimes an uncritical endorsement of eugenics. So you can breed only people with superior intelligence, and we can let others have a natural extinction. Now, this sort of attitude is very discriminatory. Now, we keep certain people who are more capable as opposed to other people less capable in terms of intelligence. That is a problem with social discrimination. In fact, one of the problems that we realized in the Second World War is precisely a certain claim of Aryan supremacy by the Nazi. Now, this theory could justify that. There is a danger with this kind of thinking. And obviously, therefore, this theory is against a certain form of socialism, a certain way in which we would like to treat everybody equally. So this also can heighten uncritical capitalism. After all, everybody is a competitor. Now, whoever survives. And then we know that can lead to crony capitalism, and we realize what kind of inequality it can develop in a society like ours. So these are some of the major problems. You may also think of other problems besides this associated to this, and maybe we will spend some time discussing this, but for the time being, these are some of the important problems, or at least implications, in accepting uncritically Darwin's philosophy of evolution. Thank you very much.